I'm Ralph Buultjens. I have this series here, and I want to talk today, and I want to share some thoughts with you today on the global condition. This year is the 13th anniversary of an experience which changed modern history, 9/11. 9/11 was the beginning of a new era, an era that has so dramatically changed our view of the world, our economics, our public discourse, our security, our expectations of the future. Every part of our lives has been touched by 9/11. Now, 9/11, it seems to me, quite suddenly and very unexpectedly, unleashed a number of hidden demons which are now infecting global affairs and which are redefining the relationship between nations and peoples. We don't know what the eventual outcome of this will be, but it seems that we have entered an era of considerable disorder. Okay? It may be some decades before we can escape from the baleful legacy of Osama bin Laden and his political children. Okay? And yet, there's another feature of our time which needs to be remarked upon. We are in an era when many good things are unfolding, good things that have the potential to transform human life for the better, to bring to average men and women benefits that our ancestors never even dreamed of. Universal literacy, okay, advances in health and public safety, public security, okay, computer literacy, okay, access to information of a kind that no one had before this. Okay. So it seems to me that we are in this paradoxical condition. On one hand, we are in a world of gathering confusion, disorder, hostility. On the other hand, we are in a world that is full of life-enhancing advances and potential. The generation that is improving us also seems to be the generation that is destroying us. Okay. This paradox, this conundrum, is what I want to explore with you this evening, because the outcome of it is what will determine the future of world politics in the next decade or two. Okay. Now, there are two ways of looking at world politics. One is to look at it in terms of the long historical flow of events, things which slowly mature, change life over a long period of time, and persist for a very long period. For example, we could look at the world today as a struggle between the West and the rest, something that has gone on from Plato to NATO, okay? The historical process that is unfolding. Okay? Now, these are very slow historical processes, but sometimes along the way there are little clusters of tightness which come, and then the stream goes on fairly peacefully. That's one perspective of world affairs. The other perspective is this: current affairs, what's happening around us day by day, the pushes, the tensions, the wars, the upheavals, things which require our immediate reaction. The problem of our time is this: both the historical flow and the contemporary situation are at some kind of cluster. It is very rare when both the historical flow becomes intense and it combines with a day-to-day series of events that is also becoming very intense. Let me expand on that a little bit. In a historical sense, I think we are in the midst of two very big adjustments that would normally have taken a century or two, but are now being forced upon us in a very short period of time. Okay. The first is this. About 500 years ago, there was a fundamental change in the global balance of power. The great powers of that time were old imperial China, the Islamic empires of the Middle East, and pre-Columbian kingdoms of Central America. They had great wealth, they had produced innovations, they were dominant powers in their area, and they expected to be dominant powers for some time. Okay. Europe was a sideshow. North America was barely discovered. Okay. About 500 years ago, these great powers were suddenly pushed aside by a small group of European countries which reached out and with their superior technology, military technology particularly, started a global takeover. Soon you saw the arrival of an era of Western supremacy, empires, settlements, wealth extraction. It was the conquest of the planet by people of white European stock. Europe became rich, powerful, the center of the world. By 1914, 100 years ago, on the eve of the First World War, 84% of the world's land area was owned or occupied or settled by people of white European stock. Okay. Now, Europe damaged itself in the 20th century and declined. But the West found another standard bearer to succeed, which was America. America became the center of world power, and essentially the North Atlantic domination of world affairs continued from 1500 until right now. I think we underappreciate the resentment that this caused in peoples outside the Western world. Now, for the first time in 500 years, that Western domination is being challenged. And most interestingly, by the very powers who were displaced 500 years ago, the Islamic groups and China. Okay. You know, power comes and goes, but the memory of past greatness is a great motivator for comebacks. Now, after centuries in the back seat, these non-Western nations feel that they can become drivers in the world vehicle. Okay. And you see it unfolding before our eyes. For the first time in 500 years, Western powers don't like political developments that develop around the world, but cannot do much about it. For the first time in 500 years, we see a huge amount of capital flowing from the Western world to the non-Western world. Okay. Trade balances, energy payments, raw material purchases. For 500 years, money has been going the other way, from the non-Western world to the Western world. Now, a lot of Western money goes to the non-Western world. It comes back sometimes as they buy up Western assets. Okay. For the first time in 500 years, invincible Western armies can't do anything very much. They failed in Vietnam in 60s and 70s, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, elsewhere. Western armies were once all victorious, have been notably unsuccessful in recent times. The flow of people has been hugely reversed. For 500 years, Westerners went to non-Western parts of the world, traded, lived there, some settled there permanently. Now every Western nation has to face a reverse flow of illegal or illegal migrants from the non-Western world. Western technology is still way ahead, but the rest are trying to catch up. The West, and I mean particularly America, has not lost, but is meeting a new series of challenges, and nations from traditionally subordinate positions are trying to reassert themselves. Okay? Now, the West is responding. America particularly is trying to make alliances with non-Western nations, for instance, with India. Okay? The American connection with trade connections around the world is growing. We are trying to create a Pacific free trade zone, technology exchanges, military links, and so on. But it is the first time in modern history that the West is being challenged to this degree, at this level. That's historically a most unusual development. The second long-term historical development is also of a complex nature. Normally, technological developments take a great deal of time before they have an impact on the world as a whole. This is true of something like the Industrial Revolution, which took about 40 years to go from Britain to Europe, about 75 years to come to America, about 150 years to go to Japan, okay, and slowly transform the world. It's true of urbanization. It took about 200 years to make a major impact on the world. But now, quite suddenly, there are a series of technological developments that are transforming the world very suddenly. It is the digital revolution. In the past 10, 15 years at most, we have seen a kind of transformation by a trifecta of computers, television, smartphones that has spread like lightning. No region has any advantage anymore over any other region. People who cannot read and write are being drawn into this cyberspace. Suddenly, everybody is sort of equal, and all sorts of knowledge, sometimes true, sometimes false, circulates around the world in an instant. Things that were done manually or through paper, reading, shopping, education, friendships, research, political campaigning, gambling, finance, record keeping, are all done through electronic activity. This is introducing a kind of equality through the technological world that has never been seen before. Today, somebody in Bangladesh or Mali or Mongolia or Fiji can have and will soon have the same access to knowledge that you and I have. This is a huge change in the historical flow. We don't know the outcome because it's so new, but soon there will be no part of the world that is considered primitive, certainly knowledge-wise. ISIS can put out videos as sophisticated as we can make them. Al-Qaeda can produce bombs as dangerous as we make them. So the Western advantage, which was so clear in the area of technological development and its application to society, is now being offset. If you believe that power is based on knowledge, power around the world is being equalized. So, this is the historical moment in which suddenly we see changes taking place of a kind that we couldn't imagine, and changes which would normally take a long time to unfold. Okay. It's part of the ebb and flow of planetary political history, and it will pass. There will be adjustments, but right now we're in that period of historical intensity. Okay. It creates fears of decline, a tendency for the Western world to respond by overreaching and overreacting, suspicions, resentments. It's one of those rare moments when history clusters. Okay. Now, in addition to this, the current flow of events, day-to-day events, is also kind of speeding up, it seems to me. Okay. In current affairs, good times are not everlasting, bad times are not for always. World politics from day to day is a struggle, a competition. Negative forces arise, disruptions take place. Sometimes things get pretty bad, sometimes they calm down. Okay. In life, you see how individuals, as they get stronger, get richer, more powerful, they seem to want to dominate others, to rise and to have that rise recognized by others. And they clash with those who are already at the top. We call it upward mobility, we call it class conflict, we call it have-nots becoming haves. As in human life, so too in world politics. When nations and forces arise, they think they're strong enough to upset the established order, especially when the guys at the top are not doing very well. Okay. And sometimes the good guys win, sometimes the bad guys do well, and always The big fish eat the little fish. Okay. In the past century, we've seen current affairs unfolding like this several times. The First World War, the Second World War, the Cold War. Each was a kind of cycle where new nations and new forces arose. They challenged the existing order of world power. Okay. Peacekeeping institutions were ineffective. Conflicts took place. Empires collapsed. There were winners and losers. And then a period of peace and stability followed. And the cycle starts again. Each cycle contains a period of time when nations that become increasingly powerful want to force their way to the top. In the past century, Germany twice, the Soviet Union. Each cycle contains a moment when awful ideas arise. The idea of German Lebensraum, space for Germany, but whose space? Other people's space. Fascism, anti-Semitism, communism, Western democracies always feel threatened. Okay. Invasions and conflicts take place. Great empires collapse. The European empires, the Soviet empire. Okay. New countries are created. And then there is peace and stability for some time. Okay. It happened after the First World War, Second World War, the Cold War. And after the Cold War, things stabilized for a while, and we had a fairly good period of calm in world affairs from about 1985 to about early part of the past decade. But now the components of a new cycle are gathering, particularly since 9/11. China arises and asserts itself. Jihadism has become a vicious ideology. ISIS invades Iraq and America invades other countries. Democracies feel threatened. And on September 10th, President Obama declared war on ISIS. He's not sure whether it was a war against ISIS or against all jihadism. So there is a kind of a pattern here. Okay? And once again, the pace of current affairs is speeding up. Okay? It's somewhat different this time, and perhaps a little more complex. Until this particular cycle, the challenges has come from the non-West. The challenges have come from the West to the West. That is Germany, Russia. Now the challenge is coming from the non-West. China economically and politically, jihadism geographically and ideologically, and the West itself is somewhat divided as we've got into a big row with Russia. But then on the other side there are also divisions. The jihadists are divided, Sunni and Shia are fighting. Okay? It's not quite clear as yet what the final stakes are. Is it the security of the Western world and its position in global affairs? Is it global order? Is it the outcome of events in the Middle East? Which empire will be at stake? The remnants of the Russian Empire? Or, if you want to put it that way, the American Empire? Is the security of the world at stake? Okay. What is the major concern of the Western world today? It is that its position will decline. Okay. Now, in the course of this intense period in current affairs, history has been made in 4 regions. Latin America is important, but history is not being made there. Okay. History is not being made in Africa or India, important as they may be. Okay. History of our time is being made within and in the interaction between 4 regions: the Middle East, okay, Russia, China, and America. Okay. These are the main stages of world affairs. What happens there will affect world affairs in the next few years. Okay. Let's look at each of them. The cockpit of so much concern today is the Middle East. And as I discussed with you last month, the Middle East is collapsing. In the past 15 years, there has been one upheaval after another in the Middle East. Okay? And today, almost every country in the Middle East has violence, civil wars, conflict within it on its borders. You've seen the rise of a huge wave of hope with the Arab Spring and it being deflated. You've seen the fear that Iran might get nuclear weapons. Ongoing wars right now in Syria and Iraq. Lebanon has been without a government for months, okay, and worse. Brutal armies are marching across the Middle East, okay, and big groups of private thugs, militias like Hezbollah and Hamas, and Iraqi groups and Syrian dissidents are at war with anybody they can fight with. There are very rich but intensely nervous principalities like Saudi Arabia and others in the Gulf. Okay. We see Turkey drifting towards authoritarianism, Israel embroiled in Gaza, innumerable conflicts, some which affect America, some which don't. From the Persian Gulf to the Eastern Mediterranean, this area is a snake pit. And outsiders who get into snake pits are likely to get very badly burnt or bitten. Okay. So what shall we do? I think there are three possibilities. One is we can get in very big to the Middle East, but we don't seem to want to do that. We can get in small to the Middle East, which is what we seem to be trying to do, but when you get in small, you end up by getting big. And then we can stay out of the Middle East. My own view is that the best thing we can do right now, given the fact that we are becoming energy independent from the Middle East, the best thing we can do now is to stay as far away from the Middle East and let it burn itself out, subject to two things: the security of Israel and the export of terrorism and jihadism to America. Okay. I think those two are the red lines. Okay. But apart from that, it seems to me that we really have no dog in Middle Eastern fights. Okay. That if wars go on in Syria and other parts of the Middle East, that's something that we would only burn ourselves by getting involved in. Okay. Now, what are the two red lines? The security of Israel and the export of terrorism and jihadism to the United States. Okay. Israel is today stronger than it has ever been before. The prospects for Israel are excellent. Its technology is superior. Its international relations have improved greatly. And you would have noted that when Israel got involved in Gaza this summer, the usual high-octane screaming from the neighbors was very subdued. Hardly any Arab states bothered very much about it. Okay? So I think it's correct to say that Israel is in better condition today than it has been for a long time. But there's one single issue that darkens the picture, and that is the relationship with the Palestinians. If that can be worked out, Israel's future is extraordinary, and it will bring benefits not only to Israel, but also to its neighbors. Now, can that be worked out? Everybody has tried and failed. Okay? America has tried, United Nations has tried, the Quartet of Four Nations has tried. Okay? All sorts of people have tried, and they have failed. I think that in the end, we will have to approach it somewhat differently. That nobody can make peace for Israel. Israel will have to make peace for itself. That is to say, at some point Israel will have to say, this is the deal. It's a fair deal to you, it's a fair deal to us. We are going to implement it. If you don't like it, sorry, we are going ahead with it. Okay. If there's trouble, we'll take care of it. Otherwise, accept it or don't accept it. We are going to define our own borders and carry out like that. It will take some time to do. I think there's not enough political will in Israel at the moment to do it, but Israel is strong enough to do this. There is, however, I think, an Israeli election coming fairly soon, and that may produce some direction in these affairs. However, this requires American support too. Okay. I mean, Israel can do this, but America will also have to support it. And right now, we are in a very peculiar position where, with American-Israeli relations. On a practical level, they are very good. Okay. Security relations are excellent. Military relationships are good. Intelligence sharing is superb. Economic relations are very good. Cultural relations couldn't be better. Educational exchange, university links. Okay. Israel and the United States act together in world affairs. America defends Israel with its veto at the United Nations and other international gatherings, and no two nations have been so close in these connections in recent years. The constituency that Israel has in this country is unique in the relationships between nations, but something is not clicking. First, it seems to relate to personalities. Now, many leaders of Israel and the United States have had very good relations, and the principals, the leaders of both nations, have differences, but they seem to be able to share those differences. However, today, the principals, Obama and Netanyahu, don't seem to be able to get on very well. Okay. And at the secondary level, Secretary Kerry and the defense minister of Israel, Moshe Yaalon, also seem to be having great personality problems. Okay. Now, it's very difficult to say who is right and who is wrong. Netanyahu is a very difficult man. Many in Israel say that, but Obama is no ball of fire in personal relations either. Okay. All right. Somehow there's something that doesn't click. And this has been made worse by the 2012 election in this country, where Netanyahu virtually endorsed Romney. And Netanyahu's loyal supporter, the multi-billionaire Sheldon Adelson, pumped a lot of money into the Republican campaign. Okay. On policy too, there seem to be some differences, not actually in the policy, but in the feelings that they have. Netanyahu feels that Obama is reaching out too much to the Islamic world, and Obama feels that it is his job to reach out to that world. Netanyahu feels that Obama and Kerry are not strong enough on Iran, has been against any talks with Iran, and wants eventually the United States to attack Iran. Obama and Kerry think they should do everything to prevent that. Obama seems to feel that Netanyahu obstructs his diplomatic efforts, and every time he makes some move, it's responded to by increasing settlements on the other side. Okay. Netanyahu feels that Obama doesn't care much about the security of Israel. Okay. On Palestine, Israel wants American help, but the negotiations are often stalled because settlements are expanded. So, who is right and who is wrong? You can make a case on each side, but that's not the point. The point is that this is a very unusual and unprecedented development in the relationship between the two nations. Many in Israel say Netanyahu handles the United States very badly. Many in his cabinet have publicly said that he is worsening relations with the United States. But there are many who say that Obama handles Israel very badly and handled Netanyahu very badly. Now, will this damage American-Israeli relationships? Yes, in the short run, but in the long run, I don't think this will have that much of an impact. After all, Obama will be here for another 2 years. Netanyahu faces a very difficult election next year. So the strength of the ties between the countries are so strong that I don't think they'll be damaged in any serious way. But it makes it very difficult to develop a set of negotiations, to have talks with Iran, for example, when our best friend in the area is criticizing us, or for things to develop when we are criticizing Israel. Okay? And it's not a very healthy situation. Both Obama and Netanyahu have coordinated America's defense relationship with Israel extremely well. Israelis acknowledge that no American president has helped them as much as Obama. But something is missing, and as long as that is missing, we're going to have a disturbing element in resolving the larger picture of the Middle East. The best thing I can say is, in a year or two, this will pass away too. Okay. So, the security of Israel is one big issue that concerns us with the Middle East. The second is export of jihadism to this country. And we are quite right to be concerned about it, especially the barbaric actions of ISIS. Okay? When they do things to Americans, they should be punished for it. But should we be getting into a long, protracted conflict with them? And this is where I think we have to be very careful, because America cannot fight ISIS alone. We recognize this. We are trying to build an anti-ISIS coalition. But who have signed up? Britain, France, Australia, Canada, Italy, Poland, Belgium, Denmark, maybe Turkey one day, but not the next day. Okay? These are all Western states. We have some support from Saudi Arabia and a little bit from Jordan and Qatar, but we are carrying 95% of the burden today in terms of the bombing program that has started. It's a very, very big bombing program. It's been going on for now well over a month. Okay? The danger of this is that if we become the leading agents of a conflict with ISIS, this could be quite easily represented to the world as an American anti-Islamic crusade. And that would create a lot of difficulties for us. We should not and we cannot be the major driving force in this. We should help, we should assist other countries, especially local countries, if they want to put their boots on the ground. But we have to be very careful that our actions do not get us into a long, protracted engagement with in the Middle East once again. Okay. What is ISIS? It's a small group that has been successful in creating a kind of horrible state consisting of about 8 million people, partly in Iraq, partly in Syria. Its territory today is scattered bits of land about the size of Maryland, mostly in Iraq. Its military is about 30,000 troops, armed with weapons largely taken from our allies when they ran away confronting Iraq. They have benefited from the confusion in Iraq and in Syria. They are a horrible group, but we must not turn this into a major world conflict. Okay. My concern is that if we do, we ourselves will be beginning another process which will take us years to get out of. The situation around ISIS is also very confusing. Assad's government in Syria and ISIS fight each other. But we are against Assad's government in Syria, and we are also against ISIS. Al-Qaeda is a bitter enemy of ISIS, and we are a bitter enemy of Al-Qaeda and also of ISIS. The same with Hezbollah. Okay? Can we defeat ISIS without strengthening these other groups? Okay? Iran has some troops on the ground, okay, helping Iraq and helping Assad to fight ISIS. But we are negotiating nuclear issues with Iran, while Iran is, in a sense, helping us against ISIS. Okay? And then Iran itself. We are talking and talking and talking with them. We have a deadline for November 24th for an agreement. I think that will probably be postponed. But what if we fail to get an agreement? Or if the only agreement we can get is a bad agreement? And can we push Iran when Iran is helping us with ISIS? instead of forming an anti-ISIS coalition, I think we should be forming an anti-nuclear proliferation coalition in the world. There are now 9 states which have nuclear weapons, including North Korea. North Korea can get nuclear weapons, almost anybody can. So we should be organizing states to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons. ISIS itself, I think, will eventually meet enough local resistance so that it will not become a huge international danger. Right now, in fact, I think Al-Qaeda is more dangerous to us than ISIS because it has an international network. But all this suggests that we have to make choices. We can't do everything. We can't confront Russia, resist China, fight jihadist terror at the same time. So we'll have to decide our priorities. And I think one of them should be addressing our relationship with Russia. Which brings me to Russia. Russia has a new Tsar. Should we not think of working with him as we did with the old Tsars and with the most brutal man of the 20th century, Joseph Stalin? We worked with the old Tsars. We got Alaska cheap. We worked with Joseph Stalin, and we won the Second World War. Putin could be a very formidable ally against terrorism and jihadism, both of which deeply concern him. He too does not want nuclear proliferation, and he wants economic ties with the West. We should not drive him into the arms of China. And we must understand that we cannot frighten Russia with sanctions, because these are people who have fought the Mongols, they have fought Napoleon, they have fought Hitler and survived. Okay? What are a few sanctions? Okay? So perhaps we should hold our nose and make some arrangements with Putin. In the next few months, year or two, we'll have to make this big choice. There are also choices for Russia. Has Putin overreached as he focuses on Eastern Europe, the Ukraine, the Crimea? As he tries to link to China, he must surely be aware of one thing. A huge China lurks over a very thinly populated, resource-rich part of Russia in the east, a part of Russia that once belonged to China. Okay. If Putin goes too far into Eastern Europe, he will have to accept Chinese domination of Russia's Asian territories. We shouldn't push him to make that choice. Okay. We also have to recognize something about Putin. You know, the things we don't like that he does make him very popular in Russia. Given the choice between being popular in Russia and being loved in America, what do you think he will choose? Okay. Now, Putin is not a very nice man. Okay. You may not want him to be your son-in-law, or your boyfriend, or your best buddy. But in world politics, it's not niceness that matters. You won't have any relations with anybody if that is your criteria. It is who you have on your side and what price you have to pay to strengthen yourself as you navigate these very treacherous waters. The time when any one nation was strong enough to carry out everything it wanted to do by itself is long gone. So we have to look for various relationships that we can establish, even though they may not be the most salubrious we want. History is being made by Russia too. And this, of course, brings me to the other history maker of our time, which is China. No other nation in modern history has risen from the periphery of world affairs to the top so fast in just 10 years. Now, you know that whole story. There's no need my repeating it to you. But what is less obvious is this: how very skillfully the Chinese have advanced themselves by playing off the policies and the mistakes of others. We are the parents of globalization. The Chinese are the principal beneficiaries. Okay. Most of the world gets into big financial difficulties in the past few years. The Chinese come out of it the strongest. They are digging up the riches of Africa. Today, well over 1 million Chinese are living and working in Africa. Nobody calls them colonists or imperialists. Okay. They have excellent relations with Israel. They have good relations with Iran. if we mishandle the present global situation, the Chinese will be the beneficiaries. Okay. So, are the Chinese the supermen of the 21st century? No, I don't think so. I think China itself, in the next few years, has to face a number of critical issues. And how they handle this will affect world politics, their well-being, and our position in the world too. There are three particularly critical questions that are coming down the pike at China. The first is this: how can those who run China, the leaders of the government and the party, how will they manage a tremendous contradiction that is evolving in China today? It's a contradiction between public tyranny and private liberty. Never in Chinese history have so many Chinese had so many personal freedoms. The freedom to dress, the freedom to live in any way they want, the freedom to enjoy themselves, to be employed as they want. The Mao suit has gone, okay, to travel abroad if they want to. But in political life, they are totally controlled. You cannot start a political party. You cannot make a public speech which the government doesn't like. You have to be careful of what you write, what you publish. Okay? This is a big contradiction. People are getting more and more personal liberties, but no public freedom. Okay? At the same time, something unique is happening in Chinese history, the growth of a huge middle class. It's a 15-year history. Okay? Will this middle class, for the first time, Chinese middle class, accept this contradiction? How long can a society continue half free and half controlled? Okay. In addition, the middle class is empowered now by the social media. It's the Chinese equivalent of Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. Okay. Will the new educated middle class look upon public control as a way in which the rulers cover up corruption, environmental issues, other flaws? Or will they be submissive and resort to just the old ethic of Confucian obedience? Okay. I think technology makes a big difference this time. Managing China in the same old way will become exceedingly difficult. But any new way of managing China means that those in control will have to give up some of their power. And if they don't, will there be the possibility of another Tiananmen Square? Okay. Will the Chinese accept the government message of today, which is that a good Confucian country believes that its people must obey its rulers? Or will the infection of the modern world, disturbance, uprising, touch China? It's the first question. And how will the rulers of China resolve that issue in the next decade or so? Because it's rising. The second critical issue that they'll have to face in the next few years is this. The Chinese have been functioning very well within the global economic and political system. They've benefited from global economics, trade. They participated in global diplomacy, okay? And they've got a lot of benefits from this. Okay? But now, China wants a bigger place in the system. They have moved to the high table. Now they want more space at the high table. If they don't get that space, participating in economic decisions, global economic decisions, participating in critical international policy decisions, if they don't get that space, will they overturn the table, or will they continue to sit at the place they have? Okay. Will they, in short, behave like pre-World War I Germany or post-World War II Japan? What I mean is this. Pre-World War I, Germany was a rising power. They felt they had come to the high table. Others weren't giving them space. They overturned the table and war came. After the Second World War, Japan too arose. They came to the high table once again. But this time, they didn't ask for more space. They just were content to eat at the high table, trading television, cars, and other things, and not demanding a more aggressive position at the top of world affairs. We don't know how China will react. The Chinese themselves don't seem to have made a decision. But if they want to be disruptive, they could make considerable trouble in world affairs, use their huge cash balances to upset the value of other currencies, support various radical groups in different parts of the world, disrupt, get into world trade disputes and so on. It is a key question for China and the world in the near future. And I wonder whether their recent assertiveness on the islands in Japan is some sort of a sign that they won't be content to simply play the same game in the same stadium that they've been doing in recent years. There's a third question that comes to us right now with a sense of urgency. The Chinese heartland, the Han people of China, the Chinese people, continue to control borderlands which are of a different ethnic origin. The interior, Tibet, Xinjiang with the Uyghur people, Inner Mongolia. And on the coast, areas like Hong Kong and Macau in a small way, and Taiwan, which have a different orientation from the Chinese heartland. They have managed to prevail in these areas so far. But there is great potential for borderland unrest. And already there are signs of Tibetan unrest, Uyghur terrorism, Inner Mongolian riots. Is Hong Kong a symbol of things to come? Now, for the most part, the Chinese have handled these questions by repression, rather tough responses. Can they do that anymore? I think these are big challenges for China. And as they unfold, the Chinese response will have a great impact on everything that happens in world affairs. As these issues arise, will China reach out to its rivals, to America, to India, to Japan, maybe even as it is doing to Russia? Or will they withdraw into themselves and the seeds of another Cold War begin to mature? After all, we had a Cold War with China from 1949 to the early 1970s. It seems to me that in the long run, China is our principal concern, not Russia, not even the Middle East. Because the Chinese challenge our economy, and our economy is the bedrock of American strength. If America didn't have the economy it has today, it would not be a world power. America became a world power as its economy became a great global economy. We ourselves are now trying a policy of soft containment of China, strengthening our ties to India, to Japan, to Vietnam, to China's neighbors, trying to initiate a free trade zone in the Pacific that excludes China. Should we be expanding this approach, or should we be trying to come to some better partnership with China? The present American policy with China has lasted almost continuously for 40 years, from the time Nixon and Kissinger went to China. Successive American leaders have allowed China access to our markets. They give us some access to theirs. We work smoothly with them. They don't disrupt world affairs too much. They have benefited a great deal. We have also got some benefits. But now the cost of it is affecting our employment, our economy more than it has before. Are we going that route, or are we going to take a stronger line? Maybe we should have a partnership with China. We have to decide that, because the present state of US-Chinese relations between number one and number two needs to be much better managed by both China and America. This is one of the great long-term issues that will decide who will be the winners and losers of the 21st century. China will change. The question is, how will China change? Okay. And then history is being made in America itself. I'm discussing America in great detail the next time we meet. But very briefly, let me say this. There are, broadly speaking, two views of America today. One is that this is a great nation in decline, that we are number one, but we are on our way to becoming Britain and France. That is, great has-beens. Okay. Number two, the second view of America, is that America has had setbacks and had some problems, but by reasserting ourselves and through bold leadership, we can recover and continue to be number one and help determine the destiny of the world. Okay. The indispensable nation, as some people call it. There's some truth in both of these views. The fact is, we cannot do what we did in the past, and if we try to do it, we'll get into trouble. But there's a lot we can do if we understand that the world has changed and we don't repeat the same old mantras. Okay. We thought of bold leadership, and we often criticize Obama, sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly. But you must remember this. America is a very difficult country for anyone to govern today. If you oppose Putin and you disagree with him, obstruct his form of government, you'll find yourself in Siberia or in an even colder place. If you oppose Xi Jinping, the leader of China, you'll find yourself in prison for life, where his great political opponent, Bo Xilai, now is. If you oppose the leader of ISIS, you will lose your head. But Obama has to negotiate endlessly, cajole, plead, persuade, endure insults, and somehow try to get something done, and even that doesn't happen. Managing America is a very difficult task today. Okay? There are several concerns that afflict America today. One is the disconnect between politics and society. Politics has become the politics of paralysis. Okay? Simple little things like approving an ambassadorial appointment stuck for months. We are in the midst of an Ebola situation, and we haven't had a Surgeon General because the Senate won't clear the appointment of Surgeon General for almost a year today. Okay? If this paralysis grows, American governance will become a train wreck. There's another concern, and that is the operating of our democratic system. Okay? We will have another test next Tuesday. I'm talking about voter turnout. Okay? If we continue to get low voter turnouts, and if public confidence in Congress is 10% or below, public confidence in the Supreme Court is about 30%, public confidence in the President is about 35%, it means that about 2/3 of the American public do not like, do not approve, or are disinterested in the way they are governed. Okay? Is this a prescription for long-term success? Okay? If we continue to open the floodgates to political money, is this democracy? Okay? These are very serious long-term issues, and some of them not so long-term. We will see next week how committed the American public is to the American political system. And we talk a great deal, a third concern, about nation building around the world. I heard the President talking about the Middle East the other day and talking about building states and making sure that they don't have too much deprivation. A cold chill ran down my spine because we desperately need nation building at home. Infrastructure, education, public services. Okay? If that need is not met, we'll end up by public services being run by profit-making institutions who will serve only those who can pay. This is a situation that makes our moment in governance a very serious one. political paralysis, okay, loss of confidence, and underfunded infrastructure. And the tragedy is that it is not necessary that with small improved performances of maybe 10-15%, we can change many of these things. Okay? It is an even bigger tragedy that no major nation in the world is better positioned to do well in the 21st century than the United States if it gets its act together. Okay? We have tremendous plus features. Okay? I've just come from a meeting with foreign students yesterday. It's remarkable how appreciative they are of our innovation. We have over 200,000 Chinese now studying in degree programs in this country. About 120,000 Chinese, 120,000 Indians studying in it. They're coming here because of our innovation. Okay? In other words, the world is voting with its best and brightest for our innovation. Our energy situation has much improved. Our population is a very good mix. And if ever we want more people, all we have to do is to open our floodgates, our gates. We get them even without opening our gates. It's something which Russia cannot get, Japan cannot get. Western Europe is frightened to open its gates, although its population is declining. Okay? Our society is very vibrant and lively. Indeed, when you look at our society, you wonder why it is in this condition. We have a very strong vehicle, but it's been driven by very bad drivers. And you know what happens to strong vehicles if they are driven by bad drivers for a period of time. Okay. Can this change? Some years ago, I was not very optimistic. But I'm a little more optimistic today because I think things like technology are making an impact. We are introducing in some states, in the northwest, computer voting, and the change in voting turnout is tremendous. The social media has tremendous potential. We are very early in the social media, and perhaps it will produce the public disgust that will limit money politics in the end. Our leadership goes through periods of good and bad, but one of the great things of democracy is you never know when you can have a leader who will emerge from very unlikely backgrounds and be a very effective leader. Okay? That is one of the great messages of democracy. You get the no-nos too, but you also get, quite unexpectedly, very successful leaders. We have had some mediocrities in recent times. The cycle is going. Perhaps we will be more fortunate in the years to come. Okay? Now, there are other things that are taking place, which are quite remarkable. There is a huge linkage that is taking place in North America between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Okay? New transportation is being built. New pipelines are being built. Some are controversial, like the Keystone Pipeline. But the three economies of the northern part of the Western Hemisphere have in the past 4 or 5 years and will in the next 10 years become very closely integrated, which means that North America will have 3 excellent attributes in the world. It will have American innovation, it will have Mexican cheaper labor, and it will have Canadian resources. Okay? If we can get this moving, it means a great deal for us. These are the pluses and minuses of things today. However, if we do not make serious efforts to mend our political system, all this can be undercut in the next 10 years or so. Okay? Now, what will be the outcome of the world that I've tried to describe, with history being made in 4 centers, and the disillusionments and the pluses that we have along the way? Okay? I think we have to accept one thing. We of the 21st century have inherited a terrible legacy from the 20th century. It was a century of many good things, but some of the worst things that have ever happened in the human story. It's a century, to put it shortly, in which Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela walked alongside Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, and Mao Zedong. Okay. We still live with those hangovers, a lot of uncertainty, confusion, but also many positive forces. Never in human history have so many people learned to read and write, and that will have a great impact on the future behavior of countries and nations. Okay. Person-to-person communication has increased so tremendously that I think in the years to come it will be very difficult for two big nations to go to war. I have students who are communicating with other students in China, in Russia, on a daily basis. Ask them to go to war with Russia and China, they say, I'm going to fight my friends. I can't do that. Okay? I think that life-giving technologies have increased so much, okay, that these positives may be able to contain, as a firewall, the disturbances of politics and of diplomacy that trouble us right now. These are, of course, speculations, and one doesn't take into account various black swans that arise. For example, something like Ebola. Will it be the great plague of the 21st century? Just as the great plague of the 14th century killed within 5 years 1/3 of the population of Europe? Can it be handled? Okay. We have had a series of various sicknesses and illnesses in recent years. AIDS, SARS, okay, mad cow disease, and so on. But always, after some time, science has been able to respond. Is there something that will arrive which science cannot respond? We don't know. Those are the black swans. Is an environmental crash a black swan, where suddenly, because of our environmental misbehavior, a whole big body of water goes dead? Okay. Or a huge area has unbreathable air. We don't know these things, but those are things that occasionally inflict the human story. The moment we are passing through is one that I have tried to define as a coincidence of historical tenseness and current affairs tenseness. Okay. I have today tried to share with you my conviction that this is a very extraordinary moment in world affairs, both historically and in terms of current events. Big questions, unusually big questions, have arisen, and they have to be addressed by major nations, Russia, America, China, what's happening in the Middle East, okay? And the outcome will impact on us for decades to come. Okay? In that sense, we also are fairly unique people of our time. We are participating in a drama that is both historical and immediate. Okay? Along the way, other nations will come. There's tremendous moment of hope politically, to my mind, in what has happened between May and October this year. 3 huge nations, India, Indonesia, and Brazil, with a population of 25% of the world's people, had free and fair democratic elections, big plus for democracy, changed their governments, and showed that democracy is alive and well in other parts of the world. So, if you're disconcerted and unhappy the way things are, or the way things are going, don't forget that many good things are also happening. The stream of history contains both crap and champagne. Okay? There are good times and bad times, and we should not get hysterical at bad times, or historically too elated at good times. But nations, like people, do their best when they keep a sense of balance and understand the limits of what they can do. Okay. What I've tried to do is to give you some snapshots of the world today in terms of its political evolution. Generally, we are lucky if we are 50% correct. Okay. But these are some of the thoughts that come to mind as we look around this rather disturbing era. The great thing is not to ruin oneself by overreaching. I grew up in a part of the world where Mahatma Gandhi was a great icon. As a very little boy, I was taken to see him, and he greeted us very briefly and said, "Hello, thank you for coming, goodbye." We had come a long distance. We expected a long sermon, big discourse from this great sage. So all of us, my parents, other people like that, said to him, "Please talk to us, say something more to us." And his answer was just this. He said, "Only speak if you can improve on silence. Only speak if you can improve on silence. I've reached that point. Thank you." We have some time for questions. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, madam. Yeah. A little louder, please. The question is this: how about anti-Semitism featuring in this big picture that I have drafted? It seems to me that one of the things we are going through, which is so difficult to explain in today's world, is this: the way in which intensely religious political expression has taken place. Jihadism in Middle East, Hindu nationalism in India, Shinto nationalism in Japan, okay, religious right, Tea Party here, okay. In the modern age, with so many secular temptations, why are people drawn to religion? For political purposes. This was a concept of political activity which died out in the Middle Ages. Religious politics was very big. The two greatest events that shaped modern politics were completely secular. The American Revolution and the French Revolution, and after that, politics was largely secular. Now religion has come back into fashion. I don't really know the reason for this. I'm studying this. I'm trying to find out why. But it is not happening in Western Europe. Western Europe is finding its expression in other things like anti-Semitism, okay, intense nationalism, the outcropping of political groups like Le Pen and his daughter, okay, various vicious political ideologies, and of course, once again, anti-Semitism. Okay. Now, is that the European expression of these other activities that are going on around the world? Or is it something else? You'll remember that the last great anti-Semitic outburst in Europe was in a time of economic depression, the 1930s. Has it something to do with economic bad times? Western Europe is going through the worst economic period it has gone through for a long time. That also seems to enhance anti-Semitism. Is it due to the activities of large groups of jihadists who are now resident in Europe and who may be stirring this up? Okay. I'm not sure of the answer to this, but it's a very dangerous trend, and it is something that you must watch very carefully, because it is found in countries that have been fairly liberal in recent times. Okay, You wouldn't think that some Scandinavian countries, okay? And isn't it a remarkable irony that Jews from Israel are seeking refuge in Germany today? Okay? So there is some outcropping of it. There's a lot of outcropping in Eastern Europe, Hungary included, okay? There is some in Russia. But to give him credit, Putin has stood against that, okay? So it's something that is, I would say, a fairly recent feature of our time. The anti-Semitism has always been there, but it's new outcropping. And it's something we have to watch very carefully because the implications of it can get much worse if we are not alert to it. Okay? Yeah. That's the best answer I can give because it's very confusing to me also. Okay? Yes? Yeah. The question is a good one. Israel is very strong. There's a lot of support and all that. But it has serious internal problems. You're absolutely right. But what I'm saying is that those internal problems are problems of internal policy which will be adjusted over a period of time. You know, it's not very different from other countries. Social issues, housing prices, okay, certain minority issues. Those are, they are not, to my mind, the nation-breaking issues that the Palestinian issue could be. Okay, that's what I want to say. They are, the government will lose or win on those issues in the next election, and so on. The Palestinian thing is a much more fundamental thing that affects the shape of Israel, and that's the point I was trying to make. There are a lot of concern in Israel, and they're doing something about the privileges given to the ultra-Orthodox, okay? But now there are some laws to try and correct that, and so on. Okay? The Palestinian thing to me is something more than the ordinary issues that nations face. After all, Israel is now over 6 decades old and still doesn't know its final borders. It's one of the only country in the world that has lasted so long, doesn't know its final border. That is what I mean. What I mean is this, that it's a fateful choice for Israel. It has either to continue dominating the occupied territories and turn into demographically an Arab majority state, or shed the territories and remain a Jewish democracy. If you dominate the occupied state, you cannot do it democratically. If you have a democratic election, Arabs will win a majority. That's what a mixed state is. Now, there are many in Israel who say that doesn't matter, we must have the occupied territory, God will take care of that. Okay? But short of that, it seems to me that the only long-term solution for the character of the Israeli state is to separate and manage its own affairs, which it can do very well. That's the thing. That requires political will. It requires coordination between the United States and Israel. Not very good at the moment, but I think given the complexion of things, in a year or two, this will also move away. I'm more optimistic about that than I normally would be about other things in the area. I'm also somewhat intrigued by the fact that Israel's neighbors are having so many problems that they have no time or interest in Israeli affairs now. Okay? And I saw a statement by the Saudi foreign minister, whose name is Prince Faisal, son of the former king, very influential man, who said the other day, well, you know, we must learn that we have to live with Israel. Now, he was very much against Israel traditionally. Maybe it's sinking into the region that Israel is an asset rather than a liability in the area. Okay? Maybe the troubles of the region are so great that they don't have the interest. As one, I think it was Shimon Peres who said when he was asked about what do you think about these different groups fighting with each other in Syria and in your neighborhood, you know, there are vicious fighting going on between Sunni Shias and Arabs and Iranians and all that. What do you think about it? He said, good luck to both. Okay. Yes.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It would be great if some of our national leaders spent some time with you, but
Have what?
some of our national leaders spent some time with you.
It's not for lack of trying on my part. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a physician
Yeah.
who's done research.
Then we should be asking you.
It's about the politics of it.
Yeah.
It could be one of the worst viruses.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Obviously, no treatment,
Yeah.
and there's no vaccine.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll be fortunate that it will quiet down as it has before when it showed its
Yeah.
head in
Yeah.
1975
Yeah.
in one nation in Africa.
Congo.
My question for you is, how will the world, WHO, CDC, and other medical and scientific leadership ever work together to deal with a worldwide potential problem?
You know, I'm going to answer it with something I don't like to say. I don't know. I don't like making that admission about anything, but anyway. Somebody once said that the only way in which the world will unite is when we are attacked by Mars. In other words, will something like this, if it's not controlled, be sufficient of an emergency for nations to rise above themselves? I don't know. That is a sort of a hope that I have. I don't know. The great problem that you have raised is this. So far, in so many things, eventually there has been some sort of an answer. Look at AIDS. It's not an answer, but still look at it today and look at what it was, right? Some response. But the Great Plague in Europe, there was no response. And it killed so many people. Is Ebola something like that? I don't know. Okay? I hope not. It's a weak answer, but I'm not a physician like you. I haven't done research on this. I can only give you a common sense answer, I think. Okay? Are there black swans like this? Yes, there are from time to time. Okay? So, not very good answer, but it's the best I can do. Okay? Yeah. Yes. I'm better on politics than on medicine. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah.
What is your feeling about the future of Japan?
What is my future about the feeling of Japan? The Japanese have had an exceptionally successful century. For most of history, the Chinese were the greatest power in East Asia. From about 1860, the Japanese began to modernize. It was a process called the Meiji Revolution. An emperor called Meiji modernized. In 1895, they went to war with China. Everybody said this behemoth China will beat the crap out of the Japanese. The Japanese won. From 1895 till 1995, the Japanese were the most powerful country in Asia. They even took us on and initially had success with Pearl Harbor. Then they were rolled back. After the Second World War, people said Japan is finished. They rose again. Okay? All along that period of time, the Chinese failed, resentful that their stepchild had done better than them for a century. Japan's economy has stalled. China's economy has done well. And now it's an opportunity for the reversal of roles. Okay? Can the Japanese get their act together? For the past 10 years, they've been trying with limited success. 6 leaders in 10 years. That's not a good prescription. However, the Japanese are very hardworking people who are very committed to things, and perhaps they'll be able to recover. But with China rising, they will never again be able to dominate Eastern Asia as they did in the past century. Okay? They are still third largest economy in the world. But it's like a huge aircraft carrier that has got stuck. It's not moving forward. To turn it around is difficult. They're trying everything they can. It's not sinking, but it's not going faster. And the rise of China has permanently stalled them in that position. Okay? Now, they have our relationship with us, which is very good, with other countries and so on. But you know, it seems to me also something strange. I mean, Japanese are very smart people. When you're very smart and you live next to a giant, you must do everything possible to have good relations with the giant. Okay? Instead of irritating about these nationalistic shrines and all that kind of thing that they're having problems. I mean, it doesn't make sense for Mexico or for Canada to get into a huge row with us. Okay? Why these very sensible people have allowed their relationship with China to drift, I just can't understand. Okay? It may have something to do also with the question that was asked earlier, that in recent years there has been a rise of the Shinto nationalism in Japan, which is what got them into trouble in the 1930s and the 40s. The rising of that, Japan is great, Japan can do this, all symbolized by this religious shrine, Yakusuni, which their leaders visit, which contains the souls of the war criminals and so on. So, I'm not surprised that Japan is unable to do better than it is, because it always has to be looked at in relation to China. When China is down, Japan is up. Now China is up, Japan is not doing so well. Okay? B, I really can't understand why a country like Japan cannot mend or lets its relationship with this huge neighbor. I mean, population of China is 10 times that of Japan. Okay? It's overtaken Japan's economy now. Can't make some relationship with this. Third, when Japan irritates China, the same issues irritate Japan's relationship with South Korea, with Taiwan, with other neighbors also, this question of the Second World War and all that, okay? So that's my feeling. I think they're going to have a long, slow process. They will not decline, but they will not be the nation they were for most of the 20th century, okay? That's a mini lecture, okay? Yes? A little louder, please. Link between Islam and fundamentalism. Some parts of Islam are fundamentalist. I mean, there's fundamentalism in every religion. And some parts of Islam are very fundamentalist. Some parts of Christianity are fundamentalist. Some parts of... You what? You what? Tapered? Well, but there's a lot of fundamentalism around. Yeah. Yeah. How, okay, I get the drift of your question. That there has recently seemed to be a greater element of, let's call it jihadism, Islamic fundamentalism in Islam. What is to be done about it? How can you cope with it? This, you know, is a fairly recent thing in its present expression. It really takes off after 1979, when the Ayatollah got control of a major state by getting rid of the Shah, and who implanted a form of Shia aggressiveness that was fairly new in the Middle East at that time, supporting Shia jihadism, supporting terrorism, and so on. That seemed to catch fire with the Middle East, with all its problems at this time. You know, the Middle East has a history of failure. They tried monarchy, that has failed. They tried militarism, that has failed. They tried Nasserist socialism, that has failed. They never have been much interested in democracy. Okay? There wasn't anything. The Ayatollah filled some need, which many of them caught on to. But it has turned into making it even worse. Okay? I think it will burn its way out. The Arab Spring was a fairly secular uprising. Okay? It was, 3 years ago, it was put down by two of the best organized groups against these disorganized young Democrats. That is, the religious fundamentalists and the army. Okay? Those young people are still there. And this is the situation. In 1980, only 25% of the people in the Arab world could read and write. Today, it's about 70% and about 85–90% of those under 25 years of age. Today, those under 25 years of age are almost 50% of the population of the Arab world. They spoke during the Arab Spring. They were successful. They got rid of Mubarak, Gaddafi, and others. They have been hijacked now. I don't think they will remain hijacked for a long time. I think that I don't want to say secular, but less intensely religious forces in the Middle East, young people, educated people, and so on, all empowered with modern devices, are being restrained by two backward-looking forces, jihadism and militarism. And I don't think that will prevail for a long time, which is why I think some rulers of the Middle East, notably the Saudis, are so scared of what the future will hold, and they should be. Okay, okay. Yes. Oh, who is talking? Yes. If you speak at the same time, it'll save a lot of time. You said something about Hong Kong? I mentioned it when I spoke, which is, to me, it's symbolic of the protest against the Chinese heartland controlling its borderlands. Now, you can look at Hong Kong in many different ways, but if you look at the borderlands, as I told you, there are revolts in Tibet. There are revolts in Uyghurs in Xinjiang, in Inner Mongolia, the borderlands, where the Han people control non-Han people. On the Pacific shore, there is Taiwan. It's not controlled by the Chinese, but it was moving towards China. Now they're having some reconsiderations because of Hong Kong. And there's Hong Kong. Different orientations from the heart of China, international looking, facing the Pacific and so on. The Chinese way of controlling their borderland territories is running into trouble. Will it continue to run into trouble? Probably. Can they handle it? If they handle it the Tiananmen Square way, it will be a mess. And I don't know whether they could handle it today. Tiananmen Square was, 25 years ago. Okay? If they concede some of the demands, it will be very difficult for them to do, because the authority of the central government will be questioned. After all, if a few thousand people in Hong Kong can challenge the government of Beijing and get away with it, it's a dilemma for them. So what are they doing now? They're playing for time. Drag it out, lengthen it a little bit, let it fizzle out if they can. They are hoping that the Hong Kong protests will go the same way as Occupy Wall Street. Okay? So we will see. It's a race against time. Okay? And this little protest in Hong Kong must be immensely worrying the leadership in China, because it's symbolic of something much more that can happen. That's my view of Hong Kong. Okay? Yes? Should Iran scare the United States and Israel? Not as much as some people make out, but to some extent. Okay? That is to say, North Korea is more dangerous than Iran. It has got weapons. Iran doesn't have yet. We're trying to prevent it from getting weapons. Okay? If you asked me that question 2 years ago, I might have said yes. But you see that Iran itself is in the midst of an intense struggle between reformers and theocrats. That is one thing that's going on. The second is the sanctions seem to have had an impact on their nuclear program, so they are talking. Whether they can, what will come of it, I don't know. But all that is one thing. Few of us realize, and fewer of us know, and I'm I don't know the details, but this is what I know. Few of us know the tremendous clandestine program that the United States, Israel, together or separately, are engaged in Iran. Suddenly a fire bursts out in some level. Suddenly some technicians disappear. Suddenly some warehouse is burnt. Suddenly Stuxnet takes place. Okay? I think before they get to the point of producing all these things, we know very little, but we do know that a hell of a lot is going on underground here and there. Okay? So I think it's not so easy for them to produce a nuclear weapon. Besides, the sanctions have had tremendous impact on their economy. So I think it's not as bad as perhaps we thought it would be some time ago. Not that it's totally without danger. On the other hand, also, Iran is now on the same side as us in many parts of the Middle East. That's the paradox. Fighting ISIS, okay? Defending the government of Baghdad. Okay? Then it's against us because they are supporting Assad. Okay? It's a mixed thing. Okay? So the choice next month, when these discussions go, may be this. Is a bad agreement better than no agreement? Okay. Should we be scared of Iran? That's putting it a little stronger than I would put it. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question about Turkey.
Turkey. Yeah.
The leader of Turkey now has great, I think, plans.
Question of Turkey and Turkey's leadership. Turkey is one of the most strategically placed countries in the world. It had military government for a long time. In 1997, military democracy, very shaky democracy took place. 5 years, nothing much. Then the present leader and his party took over, and he has run that country for 12 years. For most of that period, he has done extremely well. The economy has done well. Turkey's relationships with other countries, including Israel, bloomed at that time. Okay, Turkey became close. Then something happened. I am tying something together which may not be quite sound so smooth as I'm tying it anyway. From the time I think that Turkey's chances of getting into the European Union were humiliatingly rejected, more or less, they know. I mean, they've been trying to get in the European Union for, what, 20 years? And, next year we'll do it, we'll do it. Now it's pretty obvious that they won't get in, right? From that time, their relationship with Israel began to decline. Okay? Now, we have tried to mend that relationship. It's gone up and down. Okay? But now the leader of Turkey, who has been there for 12 years, is showing signs of what I call, this is a theory I have, leadership disease, which is that I believe that anybody who has held political power unbroken for 10 years, now if you're defeated, it's all right, you come back, unbroken for 10 years, begins to think that he or she is God, or God is them, okay? The perks of political leadership are so great in our time that if you have 10 years of continuous power, you begin to think that you can do everything, okay? It is infecting Putin. It infected Mrs. Thatcher. It infected Mrs. Gandhi. Okay? It infected de Gaulle. It's infecting Erdogan, who now is trying to move it more into a system centered on him, less democratic, more authoritarian, and so on. Okay? He had great ambitions a couple of years ago when the Arab Spring took place to be the leader of the Middle East, extending Turkey's influence here, going there, and all that, to recreate the Ottoman Empire, but Turkey is not an Arab country. Arabs are not prepared today to take Turkey's leadership. He's had a number of setbacks, okay? Now resistance to him in the country follows the usual pattern of the leader who's been there for too long. You're not against me, you're enemy of the state, okay? That kind of approach. So I think that he's heading for a crisis fairly soon, okay? He's heading for a crisis fairly soon. And I think that either he will have to change his ways or he will be in bigger trouble than he is today. Okay? He's moved his country more towards Islamism. Is it popular? He's managed to do that with the idea of influencing the whole Middle East, which hasn't worked very well. Okay? So that's where it is. I'm told that I'm talking too long. So it's time to wind up. Thank you. Next time I'll talk about the United States.